Alright, I know a lot of people are excited for this one, so here we go with today's prompt, Anne Boleyn. The second wife of Henry VIII, Anne served as Queen of England from 1533 to 1536. It was considered a scandalous marriage due to the fact that the Roman Catholic Church denied Mr. Henry over here an annulment from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. They got married without the Pope's blessing, and in 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth I. Eventually, Henry engaged in affairs with other women, which upset Anne, and he blamed it on his mission to have a son, since Anne could not do that. What a jerk. In 1536, Anne Boleyn gave birth to a stillborn male child, and Henry VIII was like, alright, on to the next one, and sought an annulment of his marriage and took Jane Seymour as his future wife. Q6 the musical comments. On May 19, 1536, Anne was executed on false charges of incest, witchcraft, adultery, and conspiracy against the king. There's so much more to this story, but I only have a minute to talk, so of course feel free to leave your extra facts in the comments below. Reading another short story from my 2019 Inktober zine titled Nightmares. Each short story is based off of a nightmare I've had, and this one is called Shadows. As I lay in bed, I noticed the bulb to my nightside lamp start to flicker. I tried to ignore it, but the mere thought of sitting in a pitch-black room made me start fiddling with it in order to keep it on. Unfortunately, this just made it worse, and the bulb inside of the lamp completely shattered. I sat for a moment, too afraid to move, until I made my way to the other side of my room. I stretched my arms out in front of me, guided by the small hint of light coming from the cracks of the door. When I grabbed the doorknob, I could feel someone's hand already laying on top of it. I jumped back and fell into the arms of a person standing right behind me. They pushed me down to the floor, and I could feel more hands grabbing at me, pulling me in every direction. I tried to scream out as the shadows silenced me, pressing their hands on my mouth and whispering, "You can't be afraid of the dark anymore." Alright, I know a lot of people are excited for this one, so here we go with today's prompt, Anne Boleyn. The second wife of Henry VIII, Anne served as Queen of England from 1533 to 1536. It was considered a scandalous marriage due to the fact that the Roman Catholic Church denied Mr. Henry over here an annulment from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. They got married without the Pope's blessing, and in 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth I. Eventually, Henry engaged in affairs with other women, which upset Anne, and he blamed it on his mission to have a son, since Anne could not do that. What a jerk. In 1536, Anne Boleyn gave birth to a stillborn male child, and Henry VIII was like, alright, on to the next one, and sought an annulment of his marriage and took Jane Seymour as his future wife. Q6 the musical comments. On May 19, 1536, Anne was executed on false charges of incest, witchcraft, adultery, and conspiracy against the king. There's so much more to this story, but I only have a minute to talk, so of course feel free to leave your extra facts in the comments below. Screaming Jenny is an American urban legend that originated in West Virginia. Jenny lived in an old storage shed along the railroad tracks. She did not have much money to her name, but always kept her spirits alive and went out of her way to help others in need. On a cold autumn evening, she was huddled over a fire to keep warm. A single spark flew from the flames, lighting her skirt on fire. She did not notice at first until the flames burnt through her clothes and began scorching her skin. Immediately, Jenny ran out of her shed screaming for help as the flames grew larger. She knew the train station was not too far away and ran towards it in hope that someone would be able to help her. Overwhelmed with pain and her body engulfed in flames, Jenny ran onto the tracks and was struck by a passing train. It is said that on the anniversary of Jenny's death, she can be seen standing on the same tracks, covered in flames, and screaming for help. Many engineers claim they have come face to face with the burning ghost of Screaming Jenny, still pleading for someone to save her. Grace Sherwood, aka the Witch of Punga, was the last woman in Virginia to be convicted of witchcraft. Grace was a healer and a midwife, often using natural remedies to heal people. Local women began accusing her of witchcraft, claiming she transformed herself into a cat, damaged their crops, and even caused miscarriages. After several charges, the court ordered that Grace's guilt or innocence should be determined by ducking her in water. Water was considered to be pure, so if Grace sunk to the bottom, the water was accepting her, but if she were to float, she would be considered a witch because the water is supposedly rejecting her body. On July 10, 1706, Grace was taken down to Witch Duck Bay in Virginia Beach. Her hands were tied to her feet, and the sheriff tied a 13-pound Bible to her neck. After being thrown into the water, Grace sunk a little bit but was able to untie herself, returning to the surface. She was put in jail for 8 years and lived to be 80 years old after her release. In 2006, 300 years after her trial by water, Grace was given an informal pardon. There is a statue in Virginia Beach dedicated to her today. For thousands of years, cultures throughout the world have created figures to represent death, and the Grim Reaper is one of the many personified versions. This figure was used heavily in the medieval period when the world was dealing with the Black Death, one of the worst pandemics in history. The Grim Reaper was used to symbolize the ending of one's life as well as fear of the unknown. They are commonly depicted as a hooded skeletal figure holding a scythe, which is used for harvesting the lives of those out of time. While the skeleton is a clear nod to what happens to one's body after they pass, the black mournful robe is very similar to the robes of priests or monks who officiated at one's funeral in the mid-14th century. In comparison to how farmers use their scythe to sow crops for harvest, it is thought that the Reaper used its scythe to sow souls from the earth when their time was up. Today, the Grim Reaper is the most recognized personification of death of all time. Screaming Jenny is an American urban legend that originated in West Virginia. Jenny lived in an old storage shed along the railroad tracks. She did not have much money to her name, but always kept her spirits alive and went out of her way to help others in need. On a cold autumn evening, she was huddled over a fire to keep warm. A single spark flew from the flames, lighting her skirt on fire. She did not notice at first until the flames burnt through her clothes and began scorching her skin. Immediately, Jenny ran out of her shed screaming for help as the flames grew larger. She knew the train station was not too far away and ran towards it in hope that someone would be able to help her. Overwhelmed with pain and her body engulfed in flames, Jenny ran onto the tracks and was struck by a passing train. It is said that on the anniversary of Jenny's death, she can be seen standing on the same tracks, covered in flames, and screaming for help. Many engineers claim they have come face to face with the burning ghost of Screaming Jenny, still pleading for someone to save her. The Norns are female deities in Norse mythology responsible for creating and controlling the fates of the gods and the people in all the realms. They are seen as the personifications of the past, the present, and the future. The Norns are tasked with keeping the Tree of Life alive, and they do so by carrying water from the well each morning to collect moist earth or clay to pour over the tree. If they fail to do this daily task, the tree would rot. It is said that when a new child is born, the Norns will appear at its birth to decide how long they will live. They measure the child's lifespan and weave their fate into the thread of life. It was common to serve new mothers a porridge called Norn porridge as an offering to the Norns to show them respect and hopefully ensure their child lives a long life.
I typically avoid discussing any sort of political stuff on this page, but one of the beautiful things about art is its subjectivity. The viewer is free to experience and interpret the piece however they like. Did the curtains represent sadness or were they just blue? You know, that thing. So for today's prompt of flame, the smelting earth may lead some of you to think of our current climate crisis, our rapid consumption of non-renewable resources and the gutting of our planet through deforestation, poaching, and the like. Some may feel this is a call to action to extinguish this metaphorical flame, for while we may not be able to reverse the damage we've done, surely we can do our best to try to salvage what remains. And still for others, this may simply be a reminder that the years start coming and they don't stop coming.
My world's on fire, how about yours? That's the way I like it and I'll never get bored.
Now, I've mentioned my disdain for this year's Inktober list and the time has come. This is the first prompt on the list that I officially have a qualm with. Don't get me wrong, Scurry was on thin ice, but I let it slide. However, I can restrain myself no longer. This was just stupid. Not on content, mind you, but in context. Match is a fine word on its own, but to place it just 3 days after Flame was idiotic. For crying out loud, this was the logo for Flame. Is it just me, or does that look like a bunch of matches to you? Now, of course, there's the option to do a match sans Flame. A burnt and charred twig is scarred from this wretched prompt list as I will surely become, but I refuse to play along with your little game, Puppet Master. Nay, I reject the noun entirely, and in its place, drew this adorable duo, just strutting happily down the street. See? They match.
I added stickers. Nothing big, just some old Inktober ones that I felt brightened up the sketchbook a little bit. I mean, if we're looking at this thing for 30 days, might as well make it look good. Anyways, today's spiders, so that's kind of cool, but I really didn't have it sorted out until right up until it was time to draw. I am usually much more prepared at this point in the month. I have everything kind of sketched out and a really solid plan for like the first week, and that is not the case this month. I'm kind of hoping that maybe we're on like this reverse Inktober thing where like usually it starts off structured and ends up a little frantic, and this year we're just going to start frantic and end up super structured and everything will be done on time. That seems unlikely, and the last...
In Japanese folklore, Nukakubi is a type of yokai whose head can completely detach from her body. She appears as a beautiful woman during the day, but at night, while her body is asleep, her head comes off and floats about. During this state, she has a strong thirst for blood and relentlessly attacks her victims, sucking their blood like a vampire. When she returns to consciousness, she has no memory of what she did, as if her head became a separate entity. Being a Nukekubi was considered a curse for committing a great sin. One story tells of a woman afflicted with the curse, whose head flew about the city at night, chasing young men through the streets all the way to their houses. Locked out, her head would scratch and bite their doors and gates, leaving gashes in the wood. When the girl discovered she had the curse, she was so ashamed, driven mad with the fact that she would live forever as a monster. There is a similar creature known as the Rokurokubi. Instead of her head separating from her body, the Rokurokubi has the ability to stretch out her neck.
Alright, this one got a little dodgy. First things first, I had no idea what I wanted to draw. I was coming up with some ideas. Obviously, dodgeball, Dodge trucks, Neo in the Matrix, dodging bullets, bumper cars, which, fun fact, are apparently called dodgems by the British. So there's that. Until I finally settled on this concept, which I then sketched out and immediately hated. It just didn't feel like my style and honestly kind of fell a little flat. So I scrapped the whole thing and reworked the entire composition. Fell back on one of my Inktober staples, which is a big circle with part of the subject in the circle and part of the subject out of the circle. Creates a little fun depth and dimension in the piece, and just a little bit more movement that this thing needed to create a really cool frog character that is hopefully not going to get hit by a car. This one's pretty obvious, right? Just going to draw a toad. Yeah, we're just gonna draw a toad. It's, look, I like to get creative with these as much as the next guy, but sometimes you just gotta do what it says. When life hands you lemons, you make lemonade, not orange juice, right? Like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel every time with these. Plus, I really like drawing toads. I've done them before. Had a whole tower of toads. They're so fun to draw. You can draw whatever shape, slap 2 eyes, a mouth, and some hind legs on that boy, and you have a toad. It is so easy, and it always looks great. And frankly, this might be one of my favorites of the month. So simple, perfect. All right, let's wander. We are now on to the second third of Inktober, the middle column for those that are following along with the actual prompt list. This is where girls become women, boys become men, and everybody just has a good cry about the whole thing. Nah, but seriously, this is where I think a lot of people drop off. In previous years, I've noticed a huge drop in the number of posts and engagement once we start getting into the double-digit days. So naturally, as a way to reward myself for making it this far and continuing with this effort, I have decided not to make one drawing, but to make 4 little drawings as part of one drawing. This was a bad idea. It took so much longer than I wanted it to, but I guess it turned out okay. The little tumbleweed is wandering around, and I'm wondering why I do this to myself.
Futakuchi Onna, aka the two-mouthed woman, is a type of yokai in Japanese folklore that is cursed with having 2 mouths. She has a normal mouth at the front and another on the back of her head, hidden behind her thick, lustrous hair. The woman's skull splits in 2, revealing lips, teeth, and a tongue. In most stories, the woman appears to never eat, but the mouth in the back of her head is ravenous and consumes large amounts of food. There are a few different stories depicting how she got her second mouth. One story tells of a man who was out in the garden chopping wood for a fire when he accidentally swung his axe and embedded it into the back of his wife's head. Oopsies! The woman survived this, but the open wound never healed and instead formed into a grotesque mouth. The woman was in a lot of pain, and the only way to stop it was to feed her deformed mouth. It demanded more and more food and eventually even began to talk, mumbling spiteful and threatening things to the woman. In Mexican folklore, the legend of La Lechuza tells of a shape-shifting witch who transforms herself into a monstrous owl. She sold her soul to the devil in exchange for magical powers. Often she is described to be 7 feet tall with a 15-foot wingspan, with the body of an owl and the face of a woman. She stays perched on trees or flies through the sky after nightfall, swooping down and carrying away whoever crosses her path. If you hear a bird screech at night, it is considered an omen that La Lechuza is searching for her next meal. Some stories claim that she will even disguise her voice as a baby's cry. She waits outside your door, ready to attack. May Na is a well-known female ghost in Thailand. The story tells of a beautiful young woman who lived with her husband, who she loved more than anything. He was sent away to war, leaving a pregnant May Na at home. Her husband returned to see his beautiful wife and their precious baby in her arms, although his neighbors tried to warn him that he was living with a ghost. One day, while May Na was preparing dinner, she dropped a lime off the porch and her husband saw her stretch out her arm to pick it up from the ground below. It was then that he realized that his wife and baby died during childbirth and that he was indeed living with a ghost. He ran from the house as fast as he could, with May Na pursuing him, terrorizing the town in her grief. Her spirit was captured by a powerful monk, confining her in a jar. Today, there is a shrine dedicated to May Na in Thailand that visitors go to offer gifts of fruit, lotuses, and incense sticks to please her spirit and ask for help.
The last time I tried to draw skateboarders, my approach was all about speed, just diving into each gesture with abandon. But this time I want to try something new, because if my dreams came true and I was invited to make live sketches at the X Games or something, I would need to make sure that a sketch of a given athlete is recognizable. So today I made a character study of just one skater that includes all of the fun details I noticed about them, from the bandana they wore to the French fries they ate for lunch, and I have it all on one page. The end result is a pretty cool collection. It's definitely unlike anything I've made before, and I'd love to do it all over again. But my goal is to capture other activities in the park in a similar way, and I've got to get to these musicians so I can record the next video and teach you about drawing rhythm.
Work all night on a drink of rum till I come and me one go home. Stack banana till the morning come. Till I come and me one go.
Olive Thomas was an American silent film actress, art model, and photo model. She began her career as an illustrator's model in 1914 and eventually became a Ziegfeld Follies showgirl, which was a series of Broadway productions in New York City from 1907 to 1931. She was also considered to be the original flapper girl since she was in a 1920 film that coined the phrase. In September of 1920, while vacationing in Paris, Olive and her husband Jack Pickford returned to their hotel suite after a long night of partying and entertainment. Both intoxicated and tired, Olive Thomas ended up ingesting a mercury dichloride solution which had been prescribed to her husband to topically treat his syphilis. Whether this was accidental or intentional became a matter of debate. Unfortunately, Olive Thomas ended up passing away in the hospital 5 days later at the age of 25. Since then, Olive has been said to haunt the New Amsterdam Theater in New York City, where she performed often. People who have seen her ghost say she struts around in a green beaded costume that she previously wore on stage while clutching a blue bottle. Stagehands say if you do see her, it is best to say goodnight, Olive, as to not offend the theater's longtime resident. In Slavic folklore, the liho is a creature that embodies evil and misfortune. Depictions of the liho vary, but no matter what, their most defining feature is that they only ever have one eye. They've been depicted as a thin, elderly woman dressed all in black, or they even appear as a male goblin-like creature that dwells in the forest. They are considered to be a servant of death, and it is best to not try and trick them, for they will always find a way to win. If you encounter the liho, you are almost always doomed to lose. In many tales, the liho will attach itself to a person's neck, making it impossible for the victim to break free. In desperation, the person will jump into a river in an attempt to drown the creature. Unfortunately, this usually results in the victim losing the battle and the liho swimming away to find its next victim. Kitsune are intelligent shapeshifters that possess magical abilities which increase with their age and wisdom. According to Japanese folklore, all foxes have the ability to take on a human form once they reach 100 years of age. Depending on the story, the Kitsune can be master tricksters, often transforming into beautiful women to trap powerful men. However, in other stories, they are portrayed as faithful guardians, friends, lovers, and wives. Kitsune can have as many as 9 tails, and the only way to defeat them is to cut off their tails. While many believed that the source of a Kitsune's power was held in just one tail, all tails would need to be cut off to defeat the spirit, as the tail which grants its power is unknown. There are 13 kinds of Kitsune, each with a corresponding element, but all of them possess superior intelligence, long life, and magical powers. Ursula Santiel, more commonly known as Mother Shipton, was an English prophetess who lived in the late 15th century. After being born to a young mother who raised her in a cave until the age of 2, Ursula was adopted by a local family as her mother went to live out her days in a convent. In her childhood, Ursula studied herbs and plants, eventually crafting potions and remedies for people as her town's herbalist. Townspeople speculated that she bewitched her husband to marry her, and after he passed away just 2 years after they were wed, the townspeople believed she was responsible for his death. These rumors caused Mother Shipton to retire into the woods, living in the cave she had been born in. She continued to create herbal remedies for people, and as her popularity grew, she revealed she could see the future. Some of her notable prophecies foretold the fates of several rulers within and after her lifetime, as well as the invention of iron ships, the Great Fire of London in 1666, and the defeat of the Spanish Armada. Her cave is considered to be one of the oldest tourist attractions in England, and the mineral content in the water is so high that it turns objects to stone.
You see a dance running through your head. Who can you call? There's an invisible man sleeping in your bed. Who you gonna call? It goes on and on and on. Remind me of everything tonight.
Yes, I'm in the zone.
Dreaming about the things that we could be.
So it's gonna be forever. You already know.
That should kill me when I'm in the spot. Don't believe me, just watch. Oh, is it too late now to say I need a one dance? And then we start to dance.
In Celtic and Norse mythology, the Selkie is a marine creature that is half seal and half human. Unlike the typical mermaid, Selkies appear as seals while in the water, but on land they take on a human form. They are said to be irresistible to ordinary humans who quickly fall in love with the Selkies. Legend says that in order to come ashore, Selkies must shed their skin or tail. If a human happened to find a Selkie's skin on the shore, they would typically hide it away, preventing the Selkie from returning to the sea. The stories often end in the Selkie being coerced into a relationship with the human who found her sealskin.
Ich habe ein kleines Problem. Ich wollte eine neue Augenpaarreihe starten, und zwar passend zu Halloween von bekannten Halloween-Filmen. An sich finde ich die Idee eigentlich echt cool, ich hoffe ihr auch. War ich gleich richtig zuversichtlich, weil mir 2 Filme eingefallen sind auf Anhieb und ich richtig Lust darauf hatte. Mit dem einen beginne ich ja jetzt gerade schon. Allerdings bin ich mir jetzt echt nicht sicher, ob ich die ganze Leinwand füllen kann mit bekannten Halloween-Filmen. Deswegen schreibt bitte euren Lieblings-Halloween-Film oder einen Film, den ihr um die Zeit gerne guckt, mal in die Kommentare. Außerdem hoffe ich natürlich, dass ihr den Film erkennen könnt. Ich finde es echt nicht einfach zu erkennen. Den Film gibt es schon etwas länger. Ich habe ihn bestimmt jedes Jahr gesehen. Die 3 Frauen in dem Film sind einfach so geniale Schauspielerinnen.
Spooky Ghost Doodles. Part 3.
Here's you. Tears falling down at the party. Saddest little baby in the room. Fears, tell me fears, don't get me started. I get a little gray hair